question in my last live as a comment, and I'll read it and then answer. And I also learned something that we'll get right into it. So someone wrote, "Thanks for sharing. I mentally check how I'm feeling and thinking, and if I'm thinking normally. I'm thinking that's pure OCD. Do you know any helpful tips?" So there's two things in there. I think one is a question about pure O, or mental obsessions and compulsions. And then the second is, body scanning. And this is something I didn't realize was an OCD thing until I read about it. And I was like, oh, I scan to see if, I'm healthy. Like, I'm always checking my body to be like, because I know health OCD is a thing. I know one of my friends was always checking to see if she had lumps, and people go to the hospital all the time for approval. So, not approval, reassurance, maybe approval. So obviously, checking body scanning is a thing. And then she's talking about pure O, and so I was doing a little bit of reading. One of the books I like to reference is Freedom from Obsessive Compulsive Disorder by Grayson. There's a volume 2, and I often tell people, look, I'm not a medical professional. I coach people with OCD because I have OCD, and I was able to get really high quality therapy. But in this book, there's a disclaimer saying the ideas, procedures, and suggestions in the book are not intended as a substitute for consulting with your physician. All matters regarding your health require medical supervision. Neither the author, publisher, etc. shall be liable or responsible for any loss or damage allegedly arising from any information in this book. It's like, if we want help, like, it's hard to find, even for me. Like, my therapist was like, look, you're out of my jurisdiction. I can't help you. Good luck. So he's like, so I can't give medical advice. This book is saying it can't give medical advice. So anyway, that being said, in chapter 10, they talk about the checking, which is what he calls the pervasive compulsion. So I can just read my highlights from the book. I certainly learned a lot from it, checking something that I still battle. Yes, I have OCD, and I was treated. At first, I was diagnosed at severe, and then 2 years later, after treatment with a CBT OCD therapist, I was within the general population. Now I don't know where I'd be. As I said, I've moved, so I don't have access to treatment myself. Depending where you live, you might. Anyway, checking the pervasive compulsion. I'll read my highlights. Maybe this will help. So just generally, the book's saying compulsions are what you do to try to neutralize your fear. So, for me, like, if I'm checking if the light's off, if the heater's off, I'm neutralizing the fear according to it. Whether, if the fear is the house will burn down, well, if I check if anything that could burn it down is off, then that would be me neutralizing the fear according to the book. I'll just keep reading my highlights. Like, checking refers to rituals that are direct attempts to affect the environment or to perceive the environment correctly. Checking rituals can be used to neutralize almost any obsession. So what I get from reading this is, obviously it's uncertain, so you check, for reassurance. So I guess really, if you're going to accept uncertainty at the base, you would be not checking. But, like, obviously it's incredibly difficult. So anyway, that's checking. That's what I thought of when she asked about, scanning, like, am I thinking okay? Is this what a normal person thinks? It's maddening. And for the second question about pure O, it's, so it's a term that's thrown around, whether or not it's pure obsession and there's no compulsion. I think what it's meant is mostly like, if your thing is you have to tap, like, that's a physical compulsion. So the idea is, if you're ruminating, they think it's purely obsessional. Anyway, what Grayson has to say here is it challenges whether or not people who say they have pure O have it. He says, he opens chapter 12 with some compliments for us. He says there's 3 traits that characterize people with OCD. It's creativity, imagination, and above average intelligence. Unfortunately, we scare ourselves to death with it, he says. So Usually friends come to us for advice because we understand, and we understand because we listen. And we can suspend our own reality to, creatively imagine what it would be like to be in someone else's position. I'm doing the Cole's notes of his book. So creativity is not something you can turn on and off, he says, and that's where we're, struck. And just fast forward to the part on Puro. He says also there's no difference in the content of thoughts between sufferers and non-sufferers, which shocked me when I first read it. But he says the frequency of the thoughts is because of our attempts to not have the thoughts. And he says if you ask people who don't have OCD, it's like, do you have intrusive thoughts? It's not helpful because they're not trying to avoid them, so they wouldn't notice them. So he says the thing is with primarily mental obsessions, he says to treat it, the goal is not to stop the thoughts or ever know what they mean about you. And someone in support group was like, but what does this mean? And so according to Grayson, we're not supposed to try and figure out what they mean, or stop having them. And that's the problem. The goal is to learn to be mindful about the thoughts, to let them be there without overwhelming anxiety. So he goes on to talk about Puro. He says there's exposure for primary mental obsessions, which is imaginal exposure. I don't know about a book just about Puro, so this book addresses it quickly here, and that might be the best you could do with it. He does say that there is exposure for it, and he says that, that's a thing people worry about. It's like, oh, I have Puro, I'm doomed. Like, there's nothing I can do. And it's hard for me to read and talk to you, but somewhere in here he talks about how, one, you can treat it, and two, there's likely a compulsion involved. It's not likely that there's only an obsession. So let me see, at risking of keeping you here while I read. I can't figure it out fast enough to respect your time, but I'll put it in the description when I find it. So that's my quick 2 cents on the comment talking about Puro and checking. When it comes to tips, I don't know. Once I really understand it, let's see what he says here. He says the goal is to not stop the thoughts or ever know what they mean. So that's helpful to me in that we tend to try and stop the thoughts. We try and figure out the thoughts, try and think of what was the thought mean about me? And then apparently in avoiding them, it means that they stick. Whereas he's saying with non-sufferers, apparently it's like seeing a red car in traffic, but if you're not afraid of red cars, you wouldn't notice it. That's what he talks about. So for the part I can't read fast enough for you, I'll put it in the description. But thanks for checking in. If you're interested in joining, we've got a support group every Friday, and at the moment, while I still have time, I'm giving away free 30-minute coaching sessions to people who are interested. So send me a direct message, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Otherwise, and there's an exciting interview coming up this coming Friday, which I think you'll have a lot of fun. It'll be this Friday, 9 p.m. Spanish time, which would be 3 p.m. Eastern American time. So thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you soon.